Welcome back. We got another section, and we're actually on the new half of this, which is active transport. So we spent the last 3 slides going over passive transport, keys to passive transport, no energy, no expending ATP. Also, there is, you're going down the concentration gradient. In other words, from high concentration to low concentration. And we'll notice that active transport is the exact opposite. It's kind of the evil twin of passive transport, although it's not evil, your body needs it. It's just moving things in a different way. So, very first off, just to look at this, it says active transport is movement that requires energy. So we need energy to do this. And this is one thing that makes it way different than what passive. We have to expend ATP, adenosine triphosphate, in order to do that. So active transport requires ATP, we just mentioned. And the second thing, what I mentioned beforehand, is it goes against the concentration gradient. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to move things from low concentration to high concentration. And you'd be kind of wondering, why do things need to do that? And the reason why it does that is because maybe your cell needs to expend a lot of things. And so you need to bring a bunch of stuff into that cell. Could be one of the things. So this is completely different than diffusion, than osmosis, than the ion channels, or the carrier proteins. Now this will use proteins that are embedded in the cell membrane. And there's hundreds of different types of proteins that do assist in this motion. And these proteins are specific to a certain molecule. All right, one that we're going to look at in specific, and we're going to break this down, we'll do a little activity in class to kind of help you out, is the sodium-potassium pump. And the big thing for this is it takes 3 sodiums for every 2 potassium. So 3 sodiums, 2 potassium, 3 sodiums, 2 potassium. Now, if we look at where a cell normally is, a cell typically has more sodium outside it and more potassium inside it. So that is the normal. Cells want more potassium in. Cells don't want sodium, so they want it out. Now, what we have here is because we have the difference in concentration, it kind of goes against what we have with natural osmosis. And in order to get more potassium into the cell or get more sodium out of the cell, we got to actually move them against their concentration gradients. In other words, we're moving from low concentration to high concentration. Diffusion, passive transport, osmosis does not work that way. This is opposite. And there's a reason why we want to do this, and that is to kind of maintain a regular system within your body. So if we would have this off a little bit, maybe I have too much sodium inside the cell, that might interfere with homeostasis of the cell. So now we go through steps. And I know I have a couple videos. We'll do an activity, kind of help you understand this, because this does kind of get a little goofy. First of all, 3 sodium, 2 potassium, 3 sodium, 2 potassium. Don't forget that. They're going to bind to this pump. So 3 sodium to the pump, and ATP is going to provide energy. Now, what we noticed beforehand with carrier proteins is that once you get something there, the pump is going to change shape. And when it changes the shape, it's actually going to open to the outside. So in the beginning, it was open to the inside, the 3 sodium, remember 3 sodium, 2 potassium, 3 sodium, 2 potassium. 3 sodium go to the pump. Once the pump notices it and it's open to the inside, and that ATP is kind of the little key that we need to unlock it, that cell is going to change its shape and it's going to open up to the outside. Now the pump is exposed to the outside, and we're going to get 2 potassium to bind to the pump. And while that shape changes, those 3 sodiums leave. Remember, 3 sodium, 2 potassium, 3 sodium, 2 potassium. So 3 sodium in, open to the inside, ATP unlocks it, it opens up the molecule to the outside, those 3 sodium leave, to potassium come in, and when it enters that, the pump will change its shape again with the potassium, and that potassium will enter the cell. Remember, potassium more concentrated inside. So we're moving that potassium from the outside to the inside, from low concentration to high concentration. Now, there's many reasons why we want to use the sodium potassium pump. And there's many reasons why active transport is really, really important. And the first thing that we need to do is we don't want too much sodium in the cell. Sodium in the cell is bad for you. It's toxic. Your cell will not be able to function correctly. And sometimes we'll have sodium automatically diffuse through ion channels, and we want to get rid of it. The reason why we want to get rid of it is because we might cause the cell to be hypertonic. And we've kind of looked at with hypertonic what happens to the cell, that the cell will have some issues. So we want to get rid of that. It also will help maintain concentration gradients for the charge of the cell. Now, if you take anatomy, we'll go into a little more advanced steps where we'll look at what goes on with the neuron, the changes within the neuron, and how the sodium potassium pump will reinstate that. So we'll go into depolarization of a neuron to repolarization to reestablishing equilibrium through the sodium potassium pump. Okay, sounds really, really advanced. It really isn't that bad once you understand the sodium potassium pump. But it's really important to have that mechanism. There are some things that really do benefit from this. One is your kidney, and then the other one are your nerves and muscles. And I already kind of talked about with your nerves and with the sodium potassium pump and how they fire off. All right, so here's a picture. We're going to kind of look through the steps right now. If you look at sodium is low inside the cell, potassium is high. Outside the cell, sodium is high, potassium is low. And this is at that first picture. And you can see the pump is open to the inside of the cell. I have 3 sodiums. Remember, 3 sodiums, 2 potassium, 3 sodiums, 2 potassium. Don't forget this. Remember that the little squigged lines right here, here's your cell membrane. Here's your polar heads. Here are your nonpolar tails. So the 3 sodiums are going to bind to the sodium potassium pump. And you can see that we're using 2 different shapes to represent that the molecules have different shapes. Now it's going to stay that way until picture 2. We need to use something in order to unlock this. And this is the key of the whole mechanism. It is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. What also makes this active transport is the fact that we got to use ATP in order to get this to work. Now, ATP is going to come to the molecule. It's actually going to lose one of its phosphates. Oh no! So once it loses its phosphate, it's going to become ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So 3 phosphates, triphosphate, 2 diphosphate, 2 phosphates. Once that goes into there, so that phosphate stays there, the molecule changes its shape. And you can see that it's now open to the outside of the cell. And, oh, see a sodium. Let's get you out of here. We don't want you. Okay, and then we're on the bottom pictures. Okay, and then there's potassium. So what happens now is we're open to the outside. The potassium is going to come into where potassium can bind, and that causes the cell to lose the phosphate group. Once then the pump recognizes that we have potassium on there, it's going to change its shape to open to the inside of the cell like it was before, and the potassium is going to then eventually move out. So potassium is moving into the cell where it's higher concentrated, and sodium is moving to the outside of the cell where it is also higher concentration. Another reason for active transport. We're moving from low concentration to high concentration, and we're using ATP. All right, so this is my first section on active transport, and this also focused on the sodium potassium pump. I know the sodium potassium pump is kind of confusing. We'll spend more time in class to kind of help you understand that. But guess what? You survived the very first part of, oh, if I can get anything off on this, you survived the very first part of active transport.